Hello and a very warm welcome to all the viewers of Detox, that is, Disruptive Literacy Talks. And this is Tanma Prakash, your host of the session. Detox aims at coming together in eradicating illiteracy and focusing upon the foundational literacy and numeracy, as committed under the Sustainable Development Goal 4 and in India's national education policy as well. We at Detox have an initiative. We basically are an initiative of Global Dream, a disruptive movement for universal foundational literacy and numeracy, that is FLN. It was launched in 2014 by Dr. Sunita Gandhi, educationist and former economist at the World Bank. By disruptive research-based methods and processes, Global Dream aims to come together in making India 100% literate in a time-bound mission. And moreover, we believe in disrupting the status quo when best is not the enough. Now, moving on to today's session. It will be based on FLN. And with this, I would like to introduce you with the speaker of the session, who has more than 34 years of childhood experience. Dr. Swati Popat Watts, founder of Early Childhood Association, who will be speaking upon the topic focusing on foundational literacy and numeracy with reference to National Education Policy 2020. Dr. Swati Popat Watts is a global early childhood expert with 34 years of experience. She designs developmentally appropriate curriculum, and her curriculum are used by EuroKids, Fodder Jumbo Kids India, and Joy of Learning in UAE and Bright Kids chain in Abu Dhabi. She was involved in developing curriculum for CBSE board 11th and 12th optional subjects of ECE and also has developed the early curriculum and teaching training material for the Maharashtra International Education Board. Recently, she was consultant for Cambridge early year programs. She has coined the term "Kiducation" as the guiding philosophy for her curriculums and recently developed a non-screen-based pre-coding curriculum for early years that helps the children to learn how to learn and think. She has written more than 25 books for teachers, parents, and children, and has recently co-authored three books, one on the India's premier educationist, Gijubhai Badheka, titled Once Upon a Story, NEP, From Policy into Practices and Metacognition, in foundational years. We at Detox are glad to have Dr. Swati Popat Watts with us. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome to Detox.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tanmay, for inviting me.
It's an honor to have you, ma'am, and thanks to you for accepting the invitation and coming on to Detox.
My pleasure.
So, ma'am, as our topic says that we are going to talk about the foundational literacy and numeracy with the reference to National Education Policy 2020. So, the National Education Policy also says that it stands irrelevant when we do not focus on the foundational literacy and numeracy. What is your take on that?
Absolutely. We should celebrate that after 34 years, we have a clear and concise education policy that focuses on the foundational years, which means early years is now part of education, and B, it focuses and stresses very, very importantly on foundational literacy and numeracy. And third, it also stresses on the use of the mother tongue. It's a sad tragedy in our country that we teach children how to read, write, and count not in their mother tongue. So they are facing new concepts in an alien language. They are understanding concepts which they will require for life, but in an in alien language. And I think this has somewhere been recalibrated by the national education policy. And that's why it is very important for everybody to understand foundational literacy and numeracy is the starting point of everything in learning and in life.
And yes, ma'am, before moving with the session, you have a presentation to present. So we would like to
Yes.
see that presentation and then we will move with the session forward.
Sure, sure. If you can help me with my presentation.
Sure, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I thank Detox for organizing this session on foundational literacy and numeracy. And I have a very short presentation to help everyone understand that it is very important for us to rework the way foundational literacy and numeracy is taught to children in the initial years. Let's go to the next slide. It is official now in the national education policy that over 85% of the child's cumulative brain development occurs prior to the age of 6. So, which means the starting point of education now, as per the policy, is age 3. So, 3 years of pre primary and 2 years of primary have now been clubbed together and are called the foundational stage. Now, this quotation I have purposely put on the screen because it's very important for us to understand that when we teach anything to children, we need to understand their brain development. Because if we don't understand the brain development, then we would make incorrect choices when it comes to the method with which we are trying to teach children. Let's go to the next slide. Mahatma Gandhi, who is the father of our nation, in 1940 had stressed on the importance of the early years and early education when he said that we labor under a sort of superstition that the child has nothing to learn during the first 5 years of its life. On the contrary, the fact is the child never learns in afterlife what is does in the first 5 years. The word foundation becomes very important, both for education and for literacy and numeracy. Foundation is what is laid during the early years. It is during the early years that children learn how to learn. And if you don't teach them in correct methods, then they would have lost a very important period of their life. And that is why our ASA report every year laments the fact that our children in grade 3 or in grade 5 are unable to read even a grade 1 textbook or are unable to count or add. And this is because the foundational literacy and numeracy curriculum in most of our schools across the country is not what it should be. Let's go to the next slide. Why play based? When we talk about the NEP talks about play based learning. Next, please. Can we go to the next slide? Have we lost the connection? Yes, Tanmay. Have we lost the connection? No, I have lost the connection. Please be there for 2 minutes. Sure, sure, sure.
Ma'am, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
I'm sorry for the network issue. Uh, so, ma'am, I'm just putting up your presentation in a while.
Sure. Sure.
And thank you for being
Technology
here.
does this too.
Yes, ma'am. This is what is known as the, we can say, the problems with the technology we have right now.
Absolutely.
These are the infrastructural barriers we are facing right now. So, ma'am, moving for the for the session, I would like to ask you that we like the problem we faced just now was an internet connectivity error. So now it has taken a shift towards the from the offline mode of education to the online mode of education. So like we are facing the problem when we are sitting in the middle of the city. So if we talk about the children from the villages, so if the rural section of the society deals with this problem, how can they like cope up with these situations?
This is something that sadly nobody knew that we'll have to go online. And everywhere, even visiting in big cities, children are facing this. You can imagine how frustrating it must be for them to have a class where some child's network connectivity is going on and off. Sometimes it's the teachers. So you can just imagine the kind of fatigue and stress they must all be going through. And then we think about those children who have absolutely no access to Wi-Fi, and for them, I think television would have been the best mode. I would have urged if television channels like television providers like Tata Sky, etc., would have dedicated one channel completely to education. Then at the time, at their own comfort level, at their own time comfort, they could have watched this. They could dedicate different days to different age group, or different time slots for different age groups, and do something for children. I think that was the need of the hour. I don't think the corporate world rose enough to support the children of this country.
Yes, ma'am. And now I would be presenting the screen for your presentation, which we were listening from you. That was a very good start. And in the middle time, the internet took all the attention.
Yes, you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So it's very important for us to understand that children learn through play, especially in the foundational years. Now, why play? Many people don't understand why should we play with children. Now, play doesn't mean only toys. Play, when we talk about play, means singing to children, doing games with children, or doing stories with children. Now, why play? Play because the first part of our brain that develops is the right brain, and the right brain thrives on play activities. So the right brain thrives on play based learning. So you would notice that when you teach these children through stories, through songs, through games, through toys, they learn faster. But the minute you give them books and writing and all, they become stressed and anxious. Now, the right brain is also in charge of long term memory. So, which means anything that you want children to remember for a long period of time, it has to go to the right brain. So that is why play-based learning, the national education policy also now stresses on experiential learning, on play-based learning, because it is what the right brain thrives on, and it goes into long-term memory. Let's go to the next slide. It is also very important to understand that to learn certain subjects later on, like history or languages or mathematics, children will need both sides of the brain. Here again, there is an activity called singing, which helps connect both sides of the brain. So when you sing, the words are processed in the left side of the brain, and the rhythm is processed in the right side of the brain. So when you sing to children, both sides of the brain learn to communicate. When you do activities like climbing, creeping, crawling, all these activities contribute to left brain, right brain communication. And that is why it's very important for educators and parents to understand why play. Why do children play in the early years? Why? There is no other stage in our life where we play so much. It's because the brain demands it, and it's because the brain needs it. And that is why everything that we plan for them in foundational literacy and learning needs to be based on play. Let's go to the next slide. It is very, very important to understand that there are four different parts of the brain, and each of this part needs to be incorporated in your lessons. So, for example, if you are using colorful teaching aids or colorful toys, it is the occipital lobe that gets stimulated. If you are making children move using their senses, it is the parietal lobe that gets stimulated. When you talk to children, sing to children, give them instructions, it's the temporal lobe which gets stimulated. And when you make children think, when you give them choices where they have to learn to use their logic, estimation, that's when the prefrontal lobe gets stimulated. And that is why it is important that when you try to teach children, ensure that your lesson plan has some stimulation for every part of the brain so that they don't get bored or anxious or stressed. Let's go to the next slide. It is very important to understand that when we talk about foundational literacy, we talk about reading, we talk about writing. Now, reading is very unnatural to the human brain because very many different parts of the brain are used when it comes to reading. Unlike language, language is something you can learn by imitation. You can watch others, listen to others, and you can learn language. You can't learn reading like that. And that is why it is very important to have a proper program in which children can understand the whole process of reading and enjoy it. Let's go to the next slide. There is a process called MVAL, which means motor control, visual discrimination, audio discrimination, and L stands for language. Language means talk to the children in their mother tongue, talk to them in a language that they understand. Let's go to the next slide to understand MVA. M stands for motor control. When you give these activities to children like block building or painting or craft, you are actually building motor control. Now, what is the motor control required for reading? Children will have to learn to have the ability to sit straight, to be able to focus, to be able to move their eyes from left to right or right to left as per the language. All this requires motor control. So when you give these activities to children in the foundational years, they are actually helping children read. Visual discrimination. It is very important that to read, I need to understand the difference between the different letters. And that is visual discrimination. So before I can discriminate between letters, you need to give me games in which I can discriminate between patterns, between sequences, etc. And audio discrimination. Reading is all about understanding what you are reading. And that's where audio comes in. When you try to teach children phonics or sounds, or what does the letter sound like, it's about audio discrimination. So all these activities first need to be given to children as a starting point for literacy and numeracy. And that is why it is said foundational literacy and numeracy. Foundational literacy and numeracy does not start from ABC or K, K, G or counting. Foundational literacy and numeracy starts from gearing the brain to be ready with motor control, visual discrimination, and audio discrimination. Let's go to the next slide. Handwriting is something that we are so obsessed with in our country. We want children to have good handwriting. We want children to write well. Well, Mahatma Gandhi said something very beautiful. He said that let children draw before they learn to write. Because when you draw something, you are able to make the patterns, the flow, the loops, etc. And drawing is a very enjoyable activity for children. So they will fall in love with the activity, which will then become the foundation for writing. It's very important to understand that what is a letter in any language? It is basically a pattern. And drawing teaches children about patterns in a fun manner. So instead of making children write, first let them draw, so that they learn the ability to learn how to draw a pattern, so that writing becomes more like drawing rather than scrawling. And Mahatma Gandhi also said that children should be able to read before they learn to write, because otherwise they won't know what they are writing. Let's go to the next slide. Here are some activities that schools should do for the foundation of writing. So before giving a pencil in the hands of children, we must do these activities because they, in some way or the other, contribute to writing. For example, balancing activities like Tai Chi. For writing, children will have to sit for a longer period of time, and balancing activities prepare their body for to have that balance. Parachute play. You can take a round piece of cloth and have children stand around it, and you can play so many games with it. Parachute play actually helps the children loosen up their joints, because you will notice that when children first time hold a pencil, they hold it very tight, and then they complain of hand paining when they are writing. That's because they have no flow in their joints. They don't know how to let loose the wrist while they are writing. And activities like parachute play help them move these different joints. Scissoring is another activity that should be given before children learn to write, because scissoring helps develop the same three fingers that are used in holding a pencil. So this activity of scissoring teaches children how to move only these three fingers and keep these two here. So it is very important to give this activity. Let's go to the next slide. Nature activities is another thing that children should have before they learn to write, because nature activities help them learn about different patterns in nature. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, thank you. Different patterns in nature, because ultimately reading is all about, no, can you go to the previous slide? Thank you. Reading is all about understanding the patterns of different letters. So when you make them aware of patterns around them, they will become more used to identifying patterns in letters and words. Throwing and catching a ball. Maria Montessori said that if children are able to catch a ball, that means they are ready for activities like writing and reading. Why? Because catching a ball requires eye-hand coordination. Your eyes are on the ball and your hand has to go and place itself under it. It's very difficult, especially for children. It's easy to throw a ball, very difficult to catch it. I'm sure you can ask our cricketers how difficult it is to catch a ball. So when you play these activities with children, you are actually preparing them for future writing. And then, of course, origami and paper folding. Writing requires instructions. You need to listen to the teacher. Teacher will tell you, upar jao, make a round circle. All these are instructions. So to prepare children's brains to listen to instructions, origami is a fantastic activity to indulge in. Let's go to the next slide. Numbers. When we come to numeracy, it is very, very important to understand that there are stages in numeracy. Numeracy does not start with just teaching children 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and making them write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They need to understand the concept of number value. Otherwise, what is number 5 to me? I don't know what is 5. You need to teach me the difference between 5 and 3. And the difference is not in the way the number is written. The difference is in its value. And it is this which is missing in our schools. And that is why children are weak in mathematics. Let's go to the next slide. Again, numeracy can be done through games and activities. It is very important to keep in mind that when you are doing numeracy, understanding comes before the technique. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. Understanding comes before technique. So when you give them puzzles, they understand shape, size, and logic. When you give them estimation game, they understand that a number that looks this much could be this value. And it is also very important to have problem solving activities through games, which will prepare the mind of the child in the foundational years for math problems. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Maria Montessori has some very interesting equipment that actually lays the foundation for numeracy. She has activities that teach children about three-dimensional shapes, because you know the shapes like circle and triangle that we are teaching children, they are surface shapes. They are a cut cross section of a main 3D shape. So it's very important to first teach children the 3D shape before we go into 2D surface and lines. Next slide. Again, in activities like parachute play, the words that we use like up, down, before, after are all words that are also used in numeracy. So it is very, very important that these concepts of literacy and numeracy should first be introduced to children in a playway method. Next slide. Next, please. Yes, thank you. Number magic, Numicon is an Oxford concept, and Numicon has these kits which are very good for math learning. I feel for foundational numeracy, schools, whether Anganwadis, Balwadis, government schools, private schools, should invest in these because they actually help children understand number value, which is the most important foundation that you can give children in foundational numeracy. Let's go to the next slide. When teaching numbers, it's important to keep in mind concrete. First, teach them what a number is, then go to pictorial. When we write a number, that is the picture of a number. So that's a number name. First comes the quantity, the value. So concrete, then pictorial, and then go numbers into worksheets. In our country, sadly, we forget the concrete part. We are straight away taking them to pictorial and then abstract. And that's why maths remains an abstract concept for children. Next slide. I'm going to show you some activities and games for foundational numeracy. As you can see, these children are using the Numicon tiles. So in these Numicon tiles, they have these holes which children can actually count, and they come to know, okay, this is 8, this is 7. And when they put the 8 and the 7 together, they can see the difference. And that is how they can understand the concept of number value. Numbers should be understood by children in any form, whether I show them 5 like this or whether I show them 5 like this, it is still 5. So they have to have that understanding that number bonds. I can make a number in many different ways. And that is the foundation of numeracy. Next slide. Shapes and space again needs to be taught with the whole body. Rudolf Steiner, who's an educator from Germany, always said that teach me with my hands, with my feet, and my entire body. Give me an immersion in the concept. Here are shapes drawn on the floor, and children have to use their body to point to the different corners of the shape. So they understand how many corners are there in each shape. Next slide. In both these photographs, you can see children using hands-on learning, and a very important thing is group learning. Because of the classroom sizes in our schools, it is very difficult to give individual activities to children. Some schools can't even afford it. So it is very important to have group play. If you see the photograph on the left, there is group play with blocks happening where children are trying to create a pattern using the blocks. And if you see the picture on the right, it's a simple game using everyday glasses, paper glasses that you have. On the back of the glass is written the number, and on the sheet are given the number value in dots. Children have to count the dots and then place the right glass over it. So these are games that actually help children enjoy their exposure to numeracy. Next slide. Now, if you will see all these photographs, you will notice that in many different kinds of activities, children are being exposed to numeracy. Numeracy is not just about paper and pen or books or worksheets. Look at this girl. She is drawing a number using a numicon tile. Look at the photograph on the right. The teacher has made the same numicon tiles in large and placed them in the outdoors. Now the child is counting the dots in each numicon tile with her feet. And that's what I said. Immerse the child in foundational literacy and numeracy. Let's go to the next picture. Next slide. Look at this. This is why I love the numicon tiles. Odd and even is such a difficult concept to understand for children. But if you look at these tiles, children will be immediately able to understand which is an odd number and which is an even number, because the odd number has one partner missing. The tile is incomplete. And in the or even numbers, the tile is complete. This can also be done in a simple activity like if you give 8 tokens to a child and you ask the child that put each token with a pair. And if there is a token left without a pair, then that means it's an odd number. But if every token has a pair, it means it's an even number. So it's very, very important that these concepts are foundational concepts. They should be understood by children, and they would be understood by these kind of activities because they are all geared towards the right brain, because the right brain is in charge of long-term memory. Let's go to the next slide. Now I want you to look at this example that I have given. Children here have written, they are 5-year-olds, they have written the number, they've written the number name. If you see, both the children have written the same. They've written the number, they've written the number name. But if you see on the left-hand side, each child has done a drawing of number 4. And each child has done a different drawing. And this is what is a combination, the best combination of left brain, right brain learning. Left brain learning is the writing of that number. Right brain learning is the drawing of that number. Each child has drawn different things for number 4. Next slide. So I have tried to give you, can you click again? Maybe the whole thing will come. Yeah, thank you. I have tried to give you ideas for literacy and numeracy and an understanding that it is important for foundational literacy and numeracy to be done in a fun and interactive manner. If you see the government document called Nipun, Nipun is the first document that the government has taken out on foundational literacy and numeracy. And Nipun outlines all the steps for literacy and numeracy and including its assessment also. So it is very, very important for all of us who are teaching children, especially young children, to understand the concept of foundational literacy and numeracy and make learning fun for children rather than a burden. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This was a really great presentation by you. So as we were talking about the foundational literacy and numeracy, so my first question, the question which is coming into my mind is that the universalization of foundational literacy and numeracy, that we are talking about the universalization. So what, according to you, is the need of the hour, or why is it so necessary to focus right now on the universal foundational literacy and numeracy?
See, it is very important that in our country, when we talk about education, we only talk about private schools. We forget our 80% of the other children, children who don't even have access to schools, children who are not going to Anganwadis, Balwadis, or government schools, and also the children in the government schools. Because these are the children who are learning their way into learning. And if they don't know how to read or if they don't know how to write, then they will resort to rote learning. And then whatever they are learning is not understood. We are creating citizens who will just rote learn. And that's why you then have these fake news, you have these fake forwards, because if you don't understand what you are learning, then you will become that kind of a person. So it is very, very important to look at education for everyone. And that is why this universalization of foundational literacy and numeracy is a welcome must.
Yes, ma'am. And I would like to question from the comment section also, that Roliji has to ask that how important is grooming for higher order skills in early childhood education, and how can it be done at the grassroots level?
So the photographs which I showed you are all what you can do at the grassroots level, because higher order thinking skills is basically your temporal lobe, which is here, which is your thinking brain. The more choices you give children in your activities, when you say aapko lal wala chahiye ke peela wala chahiye, you are making children use their higher order thinking skills. The way you ask questions to children, when we say aapko kahani kaisi lagi, तो आपको कहानी अच्छी लगी, तो दे विल से yes or no. That means they are not using their thinking. But if you ask them आपको कहानी में क्या अच्छा लगा, you are making them use their higher order thinking skills, because now they have to a think about what they liked of the story, and now they also have to try to put it and frame it into a sentence to reply to you. So it is very, very important that if teachers are given the right training, I take a training often for Balwadi teachers. I call it Dimag ka Dahi, because if you don't understand the brain, तो आपके दिमाग का भी दही होगा और बच्चों के भी दिमाग का दही होगा, because you are trying to teach a child without understanding the brain where all the learning actually happens. And that is the tragedy of our teacher training courses. We don't train the teachers into understanding brain development. We don't teach them how the brain learns. If we teach them that, they wouldn't be having so many problems in the classroom. It's not about resources, Tanmay. It's never about resources. आप indigenous materials use कीजिए, काफी available होते हैं. It is about the technique of teaching which is more important.
Yes, ma'am. And now moving on with the session, I would like to call in Dr. Sunita Gandhi, ma'am, the founder of Global Dream 30 Years Foundational Literacy and Numeracy Project. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to Detox.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Swati Papadwats. Very nice to
Hello,
be with
Dr.
you.
Sunita. Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, I've heard so much about you and your good work. Uh,
Thank you
I
so
don't think
much.
we've crossed paths yet, but it's lovely to see you here.
Same here. I hope in the near future we will.
Yes, I hope so, really. Yes. Yeah, I've been listening intently to your presentation and your great and deep study of what makes a child tick, really, and get them to acquire the skills they need to in a joyful way, but also in a more permanent way and quicker way. So I think those are really very deep insights, and I think partly because if I understand correctly, you have a laboratory of a large set of schools, so you're
Yes.
able to experiment and try things, and like a good scientist, you're doing all that. So can you give a
Well
bit
said.
insight to our speakers about this? To our listeners, rather, to our listeners, a little insight into this with our listeners as to what you've done, how you've come up with all this that you shared earlier.
Okay. Sure. So basically, we have about 490 preschools in different parts of the country. Some are in the very interiors, like you have in Maharashtra, you have a very interior place called Nandurbar, and we have schools there. We are trying to teach children everywhere in the same manner. The language may change, the culture may change, but children's brains don't change. Every child is born with the same number of brain cells. So it is very wrong if we try to teach a child in an interior in a थोड़ा कम सिखाएंगे. नहीं, ऐसे नहीं होता है. बच्चा सीख जाएगा. You just have to
Mm.
conquer his language, teach him in the child's language, and keeps a few cultural specifics in mind so that they can connect to the learning that you are giving them. I've had the good fortune to also interact with children in Abu Dhabi, in Sharjah, in Jumeirah, because we had early childhood centers there. And there also we have traditional families who come from the East and whose children don't speak English. And I don't speak their language. But when you play games with them, you realize that the barrier is gone because you are now appealing to the learning ability in the child and not to the language ability in the child. So, this work has helped me a lot to understand that when we talk about joyful learning or we talk about play based learning, it's all about engaging the child. And the only way to engage the child is to understand the child's brain.
Tremendous. Yeah, it's actually a very difficult thing to grapple with the idea of foundational literacy and numeracy because we're dealing with very little uh, children, and the teacher needs to be a guide, as in the Montessori system. A teacher needs to be a psychologist also. A teacher needs to be greatly equipped with a lot of resources. And so I was just wondering, how do you train your teacher of these 490 schools, and how do you bring them up to the standard that is required to do and implement that high agenda?
So I have written a few books on teacher training. It's called How to Teach So Kids Can Learn. And there is another book published by our association called Parikrama. Parikrama is 24 different topics that a teacher should be immersed in before she enters the classroom. And they range from social development to emotional development because sadly in our country, the foundational teacher training is very weak. We have good B.Ed courses. I myself have done a B.Ed, but even when I did my B.Ed, I noticed that the foundational years are not that covered in our B.Ed program. So when we send teachers to early years programs or primary years programs, they are ill equipped. They don't know, they don't understand child development. They don't know what is developmentally appropriate practice. They don't know what should be done before and then what should be done after. That's why the transition also suffers from the early years to the primary years. So what we have done is that when a teacher joins us, we ensure that we immerse her into 30 hours of training spread over a period of days, and also ensure that she is supported by a mentor who guides her when she is in the classroom. And throughout the year, there are additional 30 hours of training that the teacher will have to be part of. And then we have this objective question and answer kind of an assessment. So we also know whether she's able to answer with her logic about what she's doing and why she's doing it. It is very, very important to support teachers. I feel we don't support teachers with in-service training. We think if they are qualified, ab chhod do unko. And I've noticed in our country, most teachers say, this is how my senior teachers used to do, so that is why I'm doing it. They don't understand why they are doing what they are doing, and then they are not able to explain it to the parents. And so it's very, very important to take teacher training very, very seriously and train them both during work, both before they join, and while they are with you.
Right, that's fantastic. Really a good formula, and it's good to point out your books because I think others will find it helpful to take a sneak peek into them. Wanted to also know about your view on assessing because little children are hard to assess, and even your teachers you mentioned alluded to the fact that they're tested with some multiple choice questions. So, how do we know that our children are doing well, according to a matrix, or for Nipun Bharat now, the goals and outcomes?
Assessment is a must. But in our country, assessment gets confused with testing. Assessment is not testing. Assessment is understanding whether the child is on par with the child's age and developmental stage. What we do in our centers is we ask teachers to write the birth date of the child in every activity that the child does. So, next to the name of the child will be the birth date of the child. We do this because parents tend to compare children's work. But when they see the birth date, they realize कि 6 महीने का difference है तो एक ही class में but दोनों के बीच में 6 महीने का difference है, and at that age 6 months makes a lot of difference. So by doing this, we reduce the stress on the children coming from the adults, and where teachers are concerned, we teach them about observation. If you see Nipun has some 4 categories of assessment. Like when we say child is doing well or not doing well, Nipun has put it into 4 categories. Number one is child is able to do it with adult support. Number two is child is able to do something on its own and something with adult support. Number three is child is able to do it on its own. And number four is child has now excelled and needs to have more challenging activities and is able to teach his peers. So there are 4 stages where a child can reach, and they are identified so beautifully in Nipun that it helps the teacher understand at where is the child, at what stage is the child. It does not mean bad or good. It means the child is growing, and that growth path is what is called assessment. So I feel it should be trained. Teachers must be trained, and most importantly, parents should be explained it. हमारे कंट्री में ना
Yes.
लाल पेन लेके हम टिक मार देते हैं, क्रॉस मार देते हैं, and we think that's assessment. That's not assessments. That's checking. That police officers do. Teachers should not be doing it.
Very well said. It's correct. And research is totally against this kind of negative reinforcement. We need positive, and in any case, it should come from the within the child. They should know they've
Yes,
done a job well or not so well. It should not be external. It should be more intrinsic. That they should know
absolutely.
what they've done well and what is the standard. They need to know what good looks like. So that's true. There is a lot of good data from John Hattie regarding his meta-analysis of research, showing that feedback is really important. So, obviously you've worked out so well everything, and feedback, like the teachers need to be trained in their skill to take feedback, and then positively reinforce children. I'm sure that's going on pretty well. Just curious as to how you manage expectations in such a regime with parents, where you're not giving them red marks and crosses and ticks and saying good, well done, smileys, and all the external gimmicks we tend to use. I mean, there's
So
this
we
book
have an
by Alfie
orientation.
Kohn. Sorry, just mentioning, also elaborating a tad more, that there's a book by Alfie Kohn called "Punished by
Yes, yes.
Reward."
Punished by
Do you
rewards.
remember?
Yes.
And of course, case
I'm
against
I'm a
competition.
huge Alfie Kohn fan, and
Yeah.
if you read his book Feel Bad Education, that
Yes.
also outlines all the things that we are doing wrong in education. I think the most important thing is to make parents partners. And we do that by having an orientation with parents. We make it very clear to the parent at the time of admission and after admission that this is what we believe in, and you are aware of it, and that's why you are enrolling your child with us. Don't expect us to change for you, because for us whatever we are doing is from the point of view of the child. We, whenever we have a meeting also, we keep an empty chair which represents the child. So whatever decisions you are taking, you need to keep in mind that it's going to affect that child. So it's very, very important to make parents partners and help them understand the research behind why you are doing what you are doing. Like the high scope method of USA talks about the why praise is not good for children. It's like candy floss. Instead of that, feedback makes them understand where they are and where they should be headed. So if these simple things are explained to parents in a language that they can understand, because not every parent can understand English, and English should not become a barrier when it comes to parent partnership. So if we can explain it to them in the language that they are most comfortable with, I have noticed over a period of years that parents do understand, and then parent become your partners.
It's fantastic. As we are coming to the close of time, I believe you have to rush somewhere. So,
Yes.
my final question to you would be regarding challenges. It's all very well designed, but do you face any challenges in implementing this? And any other
All the
final
time.
comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, all the time. We are facing challenges all the time. Every new territory we enter in India, I especially get very scared of the north of India because it's very difficult to explain parents in the north of India about the benefit of playway. Somewhere I've noticed that parents in the north of India are very book obsessed. They are very traditional in their mindset when it comes to education, and they just can't accept the new way of education. So I'm very happy the NEP has come, and hopefully now parents would understand it. But every time we open a school, we have to start from the beginning. We have to explain to the parents. So we may be a brand, but that does not help at all when it comes to parents. Parents want to be convinced. Everywhere we go, we find untrained teachers, so we have to start their training all over again. It is hard work, but it is a fulfilling work because ultimately, when we know that when we change the parent and we change the teacher, it's the child who's going to benefit the most. That keeps us going, and that is something that everybody faces. I feel 20 years back when I launched Podar Jumbo Kids, we started with just 18 children. And today we have 45,000 children across the country, which
It's
shows
incredible.
that we were able to convince the parents to come and join us. And we did not give in to their demands. So I think it is people like you who are doing work at the grassroots level, because Tanmay was telling me about your literacy kit, and I was so amazed to hear about it. It's a fantastic kit, and I just told Tanmay, please send me details because as an association, we would like to honor the work that you are doing.
Thank you, Dr. Swati. That sounds brilliant. And we'll definitely send you a copy and look forward to your comments and suggestions. We made it for the
Yes.
underprivileged children who are on the street, in the slums.
Yes.
Those are our target group. And so we made it very simple, very thin, and joyful as well. But we'd love to have your inputs into it to make it all the things you
Sure.
mentioned as well.
Sure.
So that'd
Thank
be
you.
great. So I really, really appreciate your time with us today. I know you're a very busy person. I mean, it's not a mean accomplishment. You haven't given up or given in, both. And so hats off to you. Really, truly well done. And I'm so glad that a person of your eminence is able to join our detox, which are really to disrupt the way literacy is done and to create momentum towards the goal of having everyone literate. So I really, really appreciate your time for this particular mission. Thank you so much.
I must thank you, Dr. Sunita. You were a pleasure to talk to you. Let me tell you that. Very impressive. And I must thank Tanmay for finding me from some other talk and bringing me here. So thank you very much. And all the best to you. And let's stay connected.
Yes, I look forward to that very much, Dr. Sati. Let's keep in touch.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
तन्मय तुम भूल गए थे बेटा ये